Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Max Allan Collins, writer of Road to Perdition, brings you True Noir from the Nathan Heller casebooks, based on the 19-novel series starring Max Allan Collins' hero, Nathan Heller, once a bent Chicago PD cop turned private eye to the stars. This fully immersive 10-episode audio drama stars Todd Stashwick in the role he was born to play, Nathan Heller, a hard-bitten former cop turned cynical private investigator. He's fictional, but he gets involved in all kinds of real historical events. Production has begun on all 10 episodes. Look for a crowdfunding campaign after the production is over. That's right, after it's over.
Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination and the, well, perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm broadcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I'm coming at you from the Rob Observatory, and this is Robservations episode number 966. My God. Now, I think I need to start by singing. I'm going to sing you a little something. I am the very modern of a modern major... Oh, pardon me. I am the very model of a modern major general. I've information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the kings of England, and I quote the fights historical from Marathon to Waterloo in order categorical. I am very well acquainted, too, with matters mathematical. I understand equations, both the simple and quadratical. About binomial theorems, I'm teeming with a lot of news, with many cheerful facts about the square of the hypotenuse. Why did I sing that? Well, because I called Alex Kurtzman a grand Poobah. And where does the word Poobah come from? Well, it comes from Gilbert and Sullivan's play The Mikado. But I was never in The Mikado, so I couldn't sing anything from The Mikado. But I did play Major General Stanley in The Pirates of Penzance when I was in the 5th grade. So there you go. I'm singing you a little Major General Stanley. I am the very model of a modern Major General, only because I'm all about authenticity. As you well know. What have I said? What did I say on this show that was quoted by the Critical Drinker on Russell Brand Show? A lot of people might say, well, Rob, is that such a good thing? Yes, it is. And what I would say is authenticity. What have I been saying? The mission statement of this channel is that authenticity, in our AI-drenched age of people that never tell the truth and don't really understand what they believe, authenticity is the currency of the 21st century. I believe in that. I believe in that utterly. I think that authenticity, and I've been saying this for a while. Well, someone else has said it. Someone else said it just recently in an interview, to Will Wheaton, of all people. And if you're going to be authentic, you should be authentic to Wesley Crusher. And if you read the Star Trek Coda miniseries. Well, it's a novel series. It's a trilogy of novels that ends the Star Trek Litverse, because Star Trek Picard came along and made everything that was canonical in the Star Trek Litverse non-canonical, and they had to sweep it away. But you can read the best Wesley Crusher story ever in Coda if you want. That's Star Trek Coda, and I would read that. Now here's something I feel the need to unburden myself about this. I feel the need to maybe give you some bona fides. A lot of people talk about, they're always like, well, Rob, if you know so much about television, why don't you, if you know so much about Star Trek, why don't you go work in TV? Well, let me tell you something. Working in television is a whole different realm from working in like independent cinema. Never the two shall meet, except feature directors do go into directing for TV. And to be fair, I've worked in television. I've directed and edited my own episodes. I directed 5 episodes of TV. I did 5 episodes of a series for Skinemax, HBO. I'm an HBO-approved director of a show called Femme Fatales that would get us all canceled today. Probably will, that I now mention it. But we were shooting episodes in 3 days. It was rough. All on location, all over the place. We had no standing sets. Never do that. But anyway, so that's my only experience with TV. I could never go and work on a TV show. I mean, I don't really know how. I couldn't work in a writer's room. I've never worked with TV writers. I don't know what that's like. And I think if I was in a TV writer's room, especially a Star Trek TV writer's room, you could probably count how long I would last, on 2 hands. Maybe by minutes or seconds. Either way, it'd be 10 of each. 10 seconds or 10 minutes. I'd be out of there. No, I think I could do a good job. I could. But I don't work in TV. I've never worked in TV. I don't really know, other than that one show, I don't know anybody that works in television. The people that work in TV, especially writers, I've always admired TV writers. It's a tough gig, man. You got to start out. Usually you start now as a writer's assistant. And that could last a long time. Hopefully you're on a show that's a hit and, you work your way up. TV writers still have that apprenticeship vibe, which I've always admired. And, TV, the cream rises to the crop. The cream rises to the top, I think. The crop top. What am I thinking? But it's a whole different realm than I have ever encountered. So even if someone came and said, hey, Rob, we want to hire you for the new Star Trek show, honestly, unless I was either directing or editing, I don't know what I would do on a Star Trek show. I would want to be more in the creative area of creating the stories, the characters, that kind of thing. And that's not really what a director on a TV show does. That's what a showrunner and his writing staff do. So, But interestingly enough, I might have got this. This is a beautiful physical media box set of the Picard Legacy. I might have received this from somebody who even worked on Star Trek. I don't want to delegitimize myself, so I won't say who I got it from. But what's really interesting about this, the Picard Legacy, is what's in this box is all the episodes of Star Trek, all 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, if you break up Encounter at Farpoint and All Good Things into 2 parts, it's 178. If you watch the 90-minute versions that were not broken up into syndication, or actually after first run, then it's 176. So it's all 176 episodes of Next Gen. It's all 4 features, and it's all 3 seasons of Star Trek Picard. Now, interestingly enough, Alex Kurtzman, of course, the Grand Poobah, if you love the Mikado, the Grand Poobah of current Star Trek and Secret Hideout, is responsible for Star Trek Picard seasons 1 through 3. But you know what else is in this box set? 3 years of my own work. That's right. I work with Urban Archipelago Films with Roger Lay Jr. and Roger Lay and I, let me put this down. Roger Lay and I produced 3 years of the only Star Trek programming CBS was making. And it was all documentary work. And you can see it we did all the documentaries on the Blu-ray restorations of both Next Generation and Enterprise. Roger and I sort of split the tasks. I mean, we both worked on, he sort of took over Enterprise and I did TNG. So I did the majority of the interviews for TNG, and then I did all the editing and put everything together. And then on our roundtable conversations, we all worked together. And then Roger did the documentaries for Enterprise, and we kind of tag teamed it. And it was really gratifying. We had our own lawyers at CBS. We had 2 lawyers because we were the only people creating programming, and we were totally off the reservation. They didn't know what we were doing. You know, once Big Daddy Ken Ross gave us the ability to do whatever we want, we were sort of unleashed. And we were fanatical Star Trek fans whose job it was to show our viewers, the people that bought the Blu-rays, how do you make Star Trek? How do you make good Star Trek? How did you make Star Trek The Next Generation? And we went after as many people as we could to interview them and to ask them questions. We did things like, we knew that Seth MacFarlane was a huge Star Trek fan, for instance. So we reached out through Brannon Braga, because Brannon Braga and Ron Moore were MVPs on this. They did whatever we asked them to do. They were incredibly helpful in the creation of these documentaries. So Brandon, who was working with Seth, reached out, and we knew he was a fan, so we interviewed Seth MacFarlane, who's in the documentaries. We also asked him to come in and host what was at the time the very first Inside the Writer's Room program. This idea has been that we created that was based on something I did for the Valley Girl, the Valley Girl DVD in 2003 that we adapted, has been subsequently adapted by others. But we did it first. Inside the Writer's Room. So we had Seth MacFarlane come in and host a roundtable conversation with Ron Moore, Brandon Braga, Naren Shankar, and Renee Echevarria. And so those were the 4 guys. That was the core writing staff of the latter half of Next Gen. And what was interesting about Seth MacFarlane, he was not being paid to do this. He comes in and he's hosting the conversation. He comes in with about 30 handwritten pages on yellow ledger, yellow paper, legal pad paper, that he has written, that he has prepared. I mean, this guy, because obviously you've seen the Orville, he's a massive Next Generation fan. And he came in and he just knocked it out of the park. I mean, his knowledge of Star Trek is encyclopedic. I think it's different than mine, but it's encyclopedic. He was very impressive. And he was so nice to do it. Mad props to Seth MacFarlane. I mean, he could have held us up for money. He did not. He came and did it for the love of Trek. And you can see that on the 3rd season. When the discs originally came out, there was season by season, and we had different special features on every season. And one of the things that I personally was most proud of is that I had heard I knew this was a fact. During the 3rd season of Next Generation, in the penultimate episode of Next Generation, The Most Toys, that Saul Rubinek played Kivas Fajo, named after Lolita Fajo, as a collector. He was not the original actor to play that role. And the original actor was David Rappaport. David Rappaport was a little person, and he led, if you've ever seen the movie Time Bandits, David Rappaport was the leader of the Time Bandits. He was hired to play Kivas Fajo in the original version that was shot. He shot for 1 day on Next Gen. 1 day, mostly with Data, and then he did view screen stuff to interact with Patrick Stewart. So when we started on the Star Trek project, one of the first things I did was we were interacting with CBS Digital that was rebuilding. They took basically Next Generation all the way through post-production again. And so they had everything. They had all the negative. And I called them up one day and I said, yo, since you guys are looking for negative, you're going through all the negative, I'm wondering, there's a 3rd season episode called The Most Toys. I wonder if you've come across any negative or something that might be anomalous. Maybe it's still wrapped up in a bag. Maybe it was never transferred. Maybe you I don't know. If you come across it, I would love to get whatever it is that you find. Nobody asked me why. Nobody asked me what I was looking for. And then one day, about a month later, a drive shows up. And everybody at CBS Digital was amazing. They knew we were fanatics. I mean, we were constantly going back and forth, getting stuff from them, getting multiple. We wanted to get effect shots so we could show all the different pieces. And I get this drive that's sent to me, and it was, Rob, here is the footage you want. We've taken the liberty of syncing up the audio. And it said something to the effect of, this is very strange. There's no production reports with this negative. There's nothing with this negative. Apparently, this negative does not exist. There was no SAG, and they didn't know what it was. They just transferred it for me. So I plugged in the drive, and there it was. There was David Rappaport's entire day of filming. So what I did, and by the way, no one had ever looked at this negative, ever. And we were working on it during the 25th anniversary. So for 24 years, this negative had gone unseen. And I'm looking at this going, oh my God. And I cut it together. I took this original negative that no one had ever used from the 3rd season of Next Generation, from the penultimate episode of The Most Toys, and I cut the scenes, all of David Rappaport's scenes together. And I even ginned up the effect shots, so I used the audio. And the one thing I wasn't able to do, I mean, obviously the color timing, and I couldn't put when Fajo is in the brig, and I could have asked CBS Digital to do the effect of the, keeping him in the brig. I didn't, but I made everything look great. And then I sent it to CBS Digital, or I sent it to CBS to our 2 lawyers. Trisha Gum was one of them. And they kind of freaked out. They're like, what is this? What is this? What have you sent me? I get the phone call, and I had to explain to them what it was. I said, well, and they're like, you can't use this. You can't put this on the disc. And I'm like, of course we can. And they're like, we can't put this on the disc. There's no SAG. There's nothing. And so I said, look, I don't know. Call David Rappaport's next of kin. Call his next of kin. I mean, what's the harm? So they did. And that footage is on the season, along with the Seth MacFarlane thing, is on the season 3 disc. And for my little contribution to Star Trek, to real it's non-canonical because they replaced him with Saul Rubinek, but it's actual Next Generation footage that I got to touch and edit with my own hands, which no one will care except me and the people I'm telling the story to. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But for me, you can only imagine, as a lifelong Star Trek fan, and I was the person that asked for this, like nobody, if I didn't ask for this footage, if I didn't ask for it, there would have been nobody at CBS that would have known. Maybe somebody would have come along like at Otay or the Roddenberry Archives. Maybe Darren Doctorman or somebody like that would have asked. Maybe the Akutas. But the Akutas probably wouldn't have, because they wouldn't want to step into that kettle of fish. Me, I didn't care. I'm like, let me step into that kettle of fish. And they contacted David Rappaport's next of kin. And it turns out that David Rappaport, the reason, I didn't tell you this, the reason he didn't, the next day, he shot on a Friday, and the next day, that Saturday, he tried to take his own life. So they didn't move forward with him for the rest of the episode. They had to reshoot, and they replaced him with Saul Rubinek. And unfortunately, a couple of months later, he did take his own life, unfortunately. So this snippet of film was the last footage that David Rappaport, the actor, ever committed to celluloid. Because Star Trek The Next Generation was shot on film, posted on video, until it was resurrected for the Blu-rays. But I would say this, for me, I don't know if this is a bona fide or what, but then we have 3 years of documentaries, and it's in this box. This box that also has Alex Kurtzman's Star Trek Picard seasons 1, 2, and 3, or actually Alex Kurtzman Star Trek Picard seasons 1 and 2, and Terry Metallis's Star Trek Picard season 3, which to me is a 10-hour movie that ties up in a beautiful bow the end of the Next Generation cast. Or is it? Who knows? I don't know. Anyway, to me, I just wanted to show you that I have an authentic love of Star Trek that has been with me my entire life. As a matter of fact, You want to see something cool? Check this out. Look what I got. Now, I wasn't able to get Cisco. I got this yesterday. Look at this. 3D Trekkers. This is the Defiant. The command chair for the Defiant. Now, I have not put my X06 Cisco figure in this. But how badass is that? Look at that. Yes. What that says about me, hey. I don't know what that says about me, but hey, it's cool. You know how I love chairs. I love 6-scale chairs. But anyway, what does it mean to be authentic? I mean, what does it mean to be, to me, authentic goes hand in hand with verisimilitude. Verisimilitude is the quality of being real. I think that that's what authenticity is. If something is authentic, it's real. You know, and if you were to say tell an authentic story, it would be a real story. Now, I have talked a lot on this channel and with the Script Doctor on his channel about what I would call fraudulent creation. And we see a lot of that because, look, if you get a job in the entertainment business, fake it till you make it. No one's going to sit there and go, well, you know, I don't really know much about this IP. I know you're going to hire me because I was doing these relationship dramas with set in a magic school. And if you're going to give me a job on Star Trek, I'm not going to say no. I don't know really anything about Star Trek, but hey, it's a TV job and I've written for television. So why shouldn't I get the job and I'll figure it out later? I mean, didn't Nicholas Meyer famously not see any Star Trek before he made Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan? He gave himself a lot of work. Did Eric Jedrinson, the co-writer of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, who was going to make a sequel to Enterprise in Star Trek The Beginning, by the way, once again, Paramount, if you were going to say go back to the beginning of Star Trek, around the time of the beginning of the Federation, and the mythical Romulan War everybody talks about. They covered it in the novels. But you know, the man who co-wrote Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, and I believe he has co-written Mission Impossible 8 with Chris McQuarrie, he wrote a script called Star Trek The Beginning. And you know what it's about? It's about a graduating class. It's a graduating class of Starfleet Academy, which, by the way, made up of a lot of great characters, and Starfleet officers, and the Vulcans. And it's all about what happens when the Romulans show up and they say, hey, Earth, if you don't kick all your Vulcans off your planet, we are going to take you out. And you know what Starfleet says? Fuck you. That's what they say. Setting off hostilities with the Romulans. And this isn't some, like, you know, ground-pounding Saving Private Ryan war film on Earth. This is a truly great Star Trek story that deals with everything. It's very topical today. But at the end of the day, what it is about is the cooperation. Earth says, you will not take our Vulcans. And it's all about a new crew of freshly minted cadets from Starfleet Academy and how they go on Odyssey. And Eric Jedrinson said he wanted to do a trilogy of films. The reason he wrote this, why did he write this, you ask? Like Nicholas Meyer before him, Eric Jedrinson was hired during the brief time that Donald DeLine and Carey McCluggage were running Paramount. And after Enterprise finished, they said, they went to Eric Jedrinson, who was a supervising producer of Band of Brothers. And they said, hey, man, we want to continue Star Trek. What do you want to do? We'd like you to do something. If you did something, what would it be? He didn't know anything about Star Trek. So you know what he did? He dove into it. He dove into Star Trek, dove into it. He watched a bunch of Star Trek, watched all the way up through Enterprise. And you know what was really important to him? Canon. He wanted to do, he looked like Nicholas Meyer did. Nicholas Meyer, classically trained guy. He's written a novel. He's written a screenplay. He made Time After Time as a writer-director. He'd done the 7% Solution. So he was a classically trained guy, a man of letters, from a family of artists and musicians. Very smart guy. So when he took on the task in a very short period of time, rewriting Jack Soward's script for Star Trek II, he was able to go back to Horatio Hornblower, give it that naval feel. He understood what he was going for. He took classical literature, say Moby Dick, and he made Star Trek II, made a sequel to Space Seed. Really interesting. A canonical sequel to Space Seed. That's canonical, but, you know, it wasn't so slavish. He did it. It was enough, but it worked. Gosh, you know, it would be really interesting if somebody would ever remake Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan and write a script about, say, Khan and And yeah. Wouldn't it be interesting if somebody tried to make a movie about Khan Nooney and Singh but never told you who Khan Nooney and Singh was? Like if you didn't know who Khan Nooney and Singh was, and he was just some dude. Like even if you haven't seen Star Trek's first season episode Space Seed, and you watch Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, Khan says, on Earth, 200 years ago, I was a prince with power over millions. Okay, I get that. What if you made a Star Trek movie where nobody said anything like that, and nobody knew who Khan was? What if there was a reveal when he said, I'm Khan, and then you look to Kirk and Spock and they're like, who the fuck are you? We don't know. Do the screenwriters know? That movie actually got made. It was called Star Trek Into Darkness, and it was written by Alex Kurtzman and Bob Orsi, but it was written by Alex Kurtzman. Which brings me around in a roundabout way. I've done enough self-aggrandizement and criticism. Let's talk about the thing at hand. Let's talk about what Alex Kurtzman said about Star Trek. Let's jump into it, Let's just jump into it, as Philip DeFranco might tell you. Here we go. Let's look at this article. This article was on trekmovie.com, Anthony's trekmovie.com. I've been reading this for years and years and years. Alex Kurtzman says there's an infinite number of Star Trek stories to tell, but new shows must be authentic. This was published 2 days ago. Okay. You've been making Star Trek since 2017. By my recollection, that's 7 years. And just now, must be authentic. When they celebrated the 30th anniversary of Star Trek, you know what Deep Space Nine did? Deep Space Nine made an episode called Trials and Tribulations. And you know what they did in that episode for the 30th anniversary to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Star Trek? They actually, if you haven't seen this, I mean, it's a long time ago. It's almost 30 years ago, but because it's Star Trek's 58 years old now, but or it will be in September. But so they actually went back. They took the Deep Space Nine cast, and using the magic of digital technology of the time, they inserted the Deep Space Nine cast into the original series. Now, this was in 1996. And of course, Star Trek debuted in 1966. 30 years had passed. And you know what the people that were making Deep Space Nine didn't say? They're not like going, it's been 30 years and the original Star Trek's looking a little long in the tooth. We should give it a visual upgrade. We should change things. They didn't do that. Do you know why? Because Star Trek is the history of a fictitious future that has never happened. But it's also one of the most well-documented fictitious futures of all time. You can get blueprints. You can get a chronology that will tell you when everything happened all the way back to the time that Q took Picard to the dawn of life on Earth and before. You can read all of this. Star Trek is the most well-documented fictional world ever created. And for the most part, because you had people like the Okudas, who worked on Mike Okuda. He first worked on Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Denise, his lovely wife, she never likes it when I say this, but Denise was in the rec deck in Star Trek the Motion Picture. They found each other. They're the king and queen, or maybe the prince and princess of Star Trek nerd culture. They truly are, and they were our advisors when we were working on the Star Trek Blu-rays. But they wrote the Star Trek chronology, where you can go through and you can see exactly what happened. Like the eugenics wars took place 1996. Hey, Khan Nooney and Singh used to ran a quarter of the world's population, landmass, whatever. And you know what? When he ran the planet, when he ran a quarter of the planet, there was no murders. He did a good job. We offer the world order. Anyway, let's get to. This is the most rambling intro ever. I've been going on for 30 minutes. But let's get into this article, shall we? Let's see what Alex Kurtzman talked about. And Anthony Pascale, This has been his website for a long, long time. Alex Kurtzman says there's an infinite number of Star Trek stories to tell, but new shows must be authentic. I just want to say, actually, I didn't finish my point. Let me go back to my point. My point was that when they went back in time, Deep Space Nine, the showrunners, the people that were running it, Ira Steven Behr did not go, we're going to do a visual update. They went back and saw the classic Enterprise from 30 years ago. They even had Greg Jean came in and built another Enterprise model, built another Klingon battlecruiser, a D7, built K7 space station. He built new models that looked exactly like the originals. They were updated. They used modern lighting. But those beautiful designs were the same. Nobody thought, audiences today, they're just not going to buy into that thing. You can't change those designs because they're immutable. It's a fictional future, but it has a history. It's not like you don't go back and tell a World War II story and go, let's put jets in it. Even though, Germany did have jets at the very end, but you don't go and say, hey, we're going to have, it's not the final fucking countdown. Although F-14 Tomcats are badass, and I would love to see them splash some more zeros. But you just don't do that. The laser time travel tunnel comes and takes the Nimitz back, and you don't get to see that battle. You know why? Because that's not the way it happened. Just saying. So let's go back to this article. But those people 30 years ago, 28 years ago, the people that made Deep Space Nine, they knew they were working in a continuum of a continuity that had gone back all the way to 1966. And whenever possible, they tried to honor that continuity, and never more so than Trials and Tribulations. And if you've never seen it, do yourself a favor. But if you've never seen Troubles and Tribulations, I'll bet you haven't seen the Trouble with Tribbles either. Nor have you seen the animated episode More Tribbles, More Troubles. Don't watch that fucking short takes about the Tribbles, that the most god-awful 15 minutes of Star Trek, which is part of short takes, Discovery, whatever. It might be the worst, most offensive thing I've ever seen regarding an IP ever. But don't take it from me. Watch it yourself. So let's go back to Alex Kurtzman. Number of Star Trek stories to tell, but shows must be authentic. Maybe one day I'll get around to reading this. Okay, let's do it. Anthony Pascale wrote this on May 5th. The state of Star Trek TV has been rapidly evolving since returning to the small screen with the first season of Discovery in 2017. Several live-action and animated Trek series have launched since then, and some have or will soon come to an end. Thank God. In that context, the man who has overseen it all, has he though? Has he really overseen it all? I don't know. The man who has overseen, at least he's overseen it all as far as his paychecks are concerned. The man who has overseen it all is commenting on the history and how he approaches what's next. Executive producer Alex Kurtzman was the guest on the latest episode of The Ready Room, which mostly focused on the evolution of Star Trek Discovery over the last 5 seasons, as well as some of what it takes to make the show behind the scenes. The interview ended with host Will Wheaton asking Kurtzman to reflect on the legacy of Discovery and how it spawned the Paramount Plus Star Trek universe of shows. The producer replies, well, I fucked over Brian Fuller and took over oh, wait, no, that's not what he said. He said, it's such an incredible gift because the truth is that when we started Discovery, I wasn't thinking about that. You weren't. You were thinking about how can I usurp this from Brian's... Oh, wait, no, never mind. I was just thinking about making a great show, and I fell so deeply in love with Discovery and with the process of making it. No, you didn't. You fell in love with the money. The first people you got rid of were Brian Fuller and Nicholas Meyer, who actually had screen credit on the second episode of Discovery. Oh, wait, he doesn't have it anymore. Nicholas Meyer doesn't have his screen credit on an episode of Discovery. And, you know, where's that Nicholas Meyer Khan miniseries that they were going to make? Oh, wait. Shh. I can't talk about that. Shh. I can't talk about it. But anyway, he did write a miniseries about Khan. I can't talk about that, though. I got in trouble. And there's more to tell. It's such an incredible gift because the truth is that when we started Discovery, I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking about making a great show. And I fell so deeply in love with Discovery and with the process of making it. And I spent a lot of time that first season really kind of meditating on this incredible universe that has been around for so long and how much more can be done with it. How many amazing stories are to tell. There's really an infinite number of stories to tell. Remember, this is the man who co-wrote Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness, easily the worst big-budget science fiction movie ever made. And if you don't believe me, just go watch Peter Weller, and on his desk, in his office, he has his super secret dreadnought that he's building, but there's a model of it in his office. And no one goes, hey, man, why do you have that black starship with the gigantic hole in the primary hull? What is that? No one asks. Anyway, it's okay. Kurtzman then detailed how he approaches creating new Star Trek projects. I only want to make another Star Trek show if there's something special to say. I don't want to do it just to do more. I think that would be a huge disservice to Star Trek. It would be a huge disservice to the fans. I think the fans would feel it instantaneously. You're right about that, Alex. You are damn right about that. I've been feeling it since 2009. Honestly. So, that's authentic. I think the fans would feel it instantaneously. They would know this is not authentic because there's one thing that Star Trek fans know. If there's one thing that Star Trek fans know, it's authenticity. So for me, it's really just about figuring out a way to make sure that we take our time, we're deliberate, we're thoughtful, and we deliver on the promise of something different every time. Oh, yeah. So Star Trek Discovery Season 5 is really all a sequel to the 6th season Next Generation episode, The Chase. And, let's see, Strange New Worlds. Huh. Half your cast is from a show from the 1960s that wasn't picked up by the network. Except you don't have Dr. Boyce on there. You know, the old cantankerous white doctor. What happened to him? He was like one of the great characters in Star Trek's unused pilot, The Cage. He's nowhere to be found. I'm sure you're going to bring him in next season, though, aren't you? Aren't you? Strange New Worlds needs Dr. Boyce. Oh, no, you're going to bring another classic series character into that show again. Again. Authentic, after all. You want to have something that's authentic, that's new, that we haven't seen before, for the fans. It's the promise of something different every time. Let's see. Discovery is a prequel. Strange New Worlds is a prequel. Star Trek 09 is a prequel. Star Trek Into Darkness is kind of a riff on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, but done really badly. And then, of course, you know, Star Trek Lower Decks is a pastiche for people that watch Star Trek. Apparently everybody in that show is a big Star Trek fan. Prodigy was kind of interesting. Prodigy was a little unique. Hey, you know what's really interesting? If I was going to make Star Trek Strange New Worlds, I'd sit there and I'd think to myself, hey, man, rather than create something new, why don't we take something and repurpose something from the original series, and we're going to make it cool by ripping off the Alien franchise, and we're going to totally destroy the idea of the Gorn in the process. Let's do that. Let's make a proud spacefaring race start out being little critters that burst out of human beings and somehow run around, and then they go to school and become great scientists. I don't know. I haven't figured it out. Maybe we'll get it in the 3rd season. I don't know. We do have a picture of what's coming up in the shorter term after Discovery wraps up later this month. Thank God. We've got Star Trek Section 31. Oh, yes. Section 31. Let's take something else from Deep Space Nine. You know, in Deep Space Nine, Section 31 was really one guy. But now Section 31, you have membership cards. Everyone wears black. You have headquarters and spaceships, and everybody knows who you are. And, oh, yeah, you know, let's do an entire season about an AI called Control. And, oh, yeah, didn't David Mack, one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, write a Section 31 novel about Control? He did. Was he credited on that season of Discovery? No. What about Ursula K. Le Guin's Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus? Alex Kurtzman has said he loves Ursula K. Le Guin's story, Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus, and he was inspired to make a Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode about that very story, without giving credit in the original series when there was even a whiff that Gene Kuhn might have taken Frederick Brown's story Arena and accidentally used some of it for, well, Arena. They gave Frederick Brown credit. The entire backstory of Una, the character that Rebecca Romaine plays, is lifted from the Dorothy Fontana Star Trek novel Vulcan's Glory. But Rob, you say, Paramount owns all that stuff. Well, yes, but when I get it, I understand. But, when you're paying television writers as much as you're paying them to write, and as much as I really think that people should adapt Star Trek novels, I do think the authors should be given credit. I know Dorothy Fontana's dead, so she won't object, so we can just go steal that backstory from a Star Trek novel that we didn't write. But then why are we paying you that much money? Why does the WJ not step in and go, is that right? Is that how it should work? I don't know. Is that authentic? Is it? I don't know. I don't know if it's authentic or not. Actually, I do know it's not authentic. It's theft. And it's bereft of creativity because you're going to other authors' work and you're lifting it and you're getting paid to not write, to take other people. Oh, but Rob, Paramount owns it. Well, yeah, but you don't own it and you're in the WGA. And yeah, aren't you supposed to write something new? Isn't that the kind of thing you fought for? Do you want to get residuals? I don't know. Dorothy Fontana, could you have stolen from anyone else? Well, who's Dorothy Fontana? Precisely. The third season of Strange New Worlds is currently filming, and that will arrive next year. The fourth season has already been ordered. Oh, joy. I guess we're going to move. I can't even imagine. Never mind. Paramount Plus has also recently decided the upcoming fifth season of the animated adult comedy Star Trek Lower Decks, due this fall, will be the last. Great. The animated series Star Trek Prodigy has moved from Paramount Plus to Netflix, with the already completed Season 2 expected sometime this year, and no decision yet if they will commission more. Finally, the YA-focused Star Trek Starfleet Academy series is set to start filming later this summer, but that may not arrive until 2026. Guys, to make your life easier, I understand there's kind of a good showrunner involved, but really, why don't you revisit Eric Jedrinson's Star Trek The Beginning script? Better yet, why not have Eric Jedrinson come and Chris McQuarrie direct? He's a huge Star Trek fan, I can tell you that. And have McQuarrie and Jedrinson write that trilogy, the Romulan War trilogy. Why don't you guys make that and release it theatrically? And guess what? Why don't you cap the budget at $100 million? I bet you can. And I bet if you did that, you might actually make money on a Star Trek movie. What a novel idea. How much money does Star Trek 4 have against it? How many writers, how many directors, how many scripts have been developed? How much money have you spent not making Star Trek 4? Hey, Alex Kurtzman, is that authentic? Bad Robot, is that authentic? How much money have you guys spent? How many aborted attempts to make Star Trek 4 are there? I don't know. Eric Jedrinson's script's lying around. It's only a first draft. It's not perfect. But I'll tell you one thing. That guy made Band of Brothers. And his Mission Impossible movie made a lot more money, even though it wasn't one of the great missions. It's good. But that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning made more money than all three of your Star Trek movies did. Why don't you go get that team to go make a Star Trek movie? They're authentic. Do that. So even compared to the streaming wars peak of a couple of years ago, there is still a significant amount of Star Trek TV lined up for the next couple of years. Oh, joy. And Kurtzman has been teasing there are more surprises to come. Are there? Yeah, going back to Next Generation's 6th season episode, The Chase. The only surprise I'm looking for, and if you guys are smart, you better bring back Salome Jens. And I know, if you have to ask yourself who Salome Jens is, and you have to look that shit up, you're not authentic. And why would I ask to bring back Salome Jens? Well, if you don't know off the top of your head, you should not be working on Star Trek. I'm just saying, are you authentic? Are you authentic? Why would I say that? And if you were to say, well, Rob, clearly you're a fan of John Frankenheimer's wonderful movie Seconds with Rock Hudson and Salome Jens. It's one of the great sci-fi films of the 60s. I mean, right? That it must be that. It must be that. That must be why I'm bringing up Salome Jens. She's still around. Check it out. Let's see. Of course, fans are already weighing on that future, including an effort to save Star Trek Lower Decks and calls for Terry Matalas's Star Trek Legacy follow-up to Picard to get the green light, something Kurtzman recently said was out of his hands. Okay. Really? It was out of his hands? Like, he's the guy, Secret Hideout is running Star Trek. They're running Star Trek. There has not been anything that has anything to do with Star Trek that hasn't gone through the hands of Secret Hideout since 2017. It's out of his hands. Do you know what was in Alex Kurtzman's hands and Akiva Goldsman's hands? That Terry Matalas was able to take over Star Trek Picard Season 3. Do you know why Terry Matalas was able to take over Star Trek Picard Season 3 and basically do what he wanted and bring in a lot of his writing staff? I mean, he had some of the writing staff that was in place, true, but he brought back some of his writing staff from 12 Monkeys, and if you haven't seen 12 Monkeys, a banger 4 seasons, that also stars Todd Stashwick as Deacon, and he is going to be in our audio drama True Noir. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. See, Alex Kurtzman, in his infinite quest to make something original, wanted to make a sequel to Nicholas Roeg's The Man Who Fell to Earth that's based on the novel by Walter Tevis. Shockingly original. So he did. And to be fair, to give credit where credit is due, Chiwetel Ejiofor was great, and it wasn't bad. I know. I'm saying it. It wasn't bad. It was interesting. And I'm a huge Walter Tevis fan. And for anybody out there, if you really want to read an interesting book, so Walter Tevis wrote The Hustler and Color Money, Fast Eddie Felson, Paul Newman movies. He also wrote The Queen's Gambit, that Scott Frank turned into the awesome miniseries with Anya Taylor-Joy. And he wrote Man Who Fell to Earth, that Nicholas Roeg directed with David Bowie, that came out in 1976. If you haven't seen it, why haven't you? One of the great mid-70s science fiction movies. Hey, it's a great double bill with Logan's Run. But anyway, so here's the thing. Akiva Goldsman went to make Strange New Worlds, and basically put that Lost in Space, I, Robot, I Am Legend spin on it. Look, here's the thing about Akiva Goldsman. Akiva Goldsman, say what you want, he wrote and directed the adaptation of Mark Halperin's novel A Winter's Tale, one of the great novels of the 20th century. He fucked it up. You know that cook on Instagram? Don't fuck it up. I don't think anyone fucked up anything as badly as anyone. Akiva Goldsman, his adaptation of A Winter's Tale. My God, if he should be put in director's jail, if any, he should, and he controls Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. My God, do me a favor, read Mark Halperin's book A Winter's Tale. Also read A Soldier of a Great War, and read his new book. I think it's The Ocean and the Stars. Is that the title? Read that book. What Akiva Goldsman did to Mark Halperin's novel, the writing and directing of that movie, he should be banned from writing and directing anything ever again. Just saying. Read that book and then actually don't watch the movie. Just read the book. The book is great. But anyway, so nobody was around to do Star Trek Picard Season 3. So Terry Matalas, who was working a little bit on Star Trek Picard Season 2, stepped in, and he had worked on Voyager, and he'd worked on Deep Space Nine, Enterprise. He was Brandon Braga's assistant. He started out, he worked in post-production as a PA. He goes back, he's old school Star Trek. He's got Roddenberry DNA Star Trek running through his bones. He's a huge fan. Do you know he owns actual DeLoreans? He has a tricked out, it doesn't actually travel through time, but he has a Back to the Future DeLorean. He's got multiple DeLoreans, like real DeLoreans. Come on. This guy knows what's up. He knows what we wanted to see. And he went and got Christopher Plummer's daughter, Amanda Plummer, from Pulp Fiction. And from a lot of other things too, from Needful Things. And she's even getting an Exo-6 action figure and had her smoking on a bridge. How cool is that? But anyway, he made Star Trek Picard Season 3. Accolades, awards, made it into streaming top 10s, won Saturns, everyone loved it. It's in this box set. Just saying. Yeah. So they abandoned Star Trek, Alex Kurtzman. They left Kurtzman to go do something else. And, of course, Akiva Goldsman went to Canada to go make Strange New Worlds, which is an insipid, watered-down, high school level take on the original series that everyone likes because Anson Mount's a handsome dude, and everybody recognizes themselves as part of the crew. Anyway, so I guess, this article, he's calling for authenticity. My question is, what the fuck does that mean? What do you mean authentic? There's a really interesting red carpet interview. I don't know where it is. I saw a red carpet interview with Jerry Ryan. And Jerry Ryan, like on the red carpet, I don't know if it was maybe it was at the Picard premiere where she goes up to Alex Kurtzman and says, well, we've teed up the new show for you. And you can see in his eyes when she says that, he doesn't know what she was talking about. He doesn't know what she was talking about. Like, she's like, because, all the fans knew. But she apparently didn't. He didn't know. And when she's saying, yeah, Star Trek Legacy, let's go. Or as Wolverine might say, let's fucking go. Like, everybody wants that. And, apparently, he didn't know. I mean, I can't prove that. But, you can kind of see it in his eyes. What's happening? I don't know. But here's the thing. If you're going to say that you want authentic Star Trek, you got to go back to the original. You got to go back to the original series. Everything that Secret Hideout has done has been not original. I mean, even Lower Decks is just a riff on all the Star Trek that came before. Star Trek Prodigy, you could say, is original, I guess. But everything else is derived from, when they were doing Star Trek The Next Generation, there was a conscious effort to jump almost 100 years ahead, and there was a mandate. We're not going to fall back. Sure, DeForest Kelley was in the first episode, Encounter at Farpoint. And there was a few mentions because John D.F. Black wrote The Naked Now, and which was a reference back to The Naked Time. And that was the second episode of Next Gen, and it's not a good episode. It wasn't until the third season of Next Gen that they brought Mark Leonard back to play Sarek, Spock's father. And Ira Stephen Bear had to beg. He tells a story on my documentaries. Had to beg Rick Berman to use the name Spock. And Rick Berman said, okay. He finally relented after all this badgering. You can say Spock once. And it's that incredible moment when Picard is mind melding with Sarek. And there's that pain that comes out. That was the only time there was really a direct reference or a character or a situation. 3 seasons in, all of Secret Hideout Star Trek has been reboots, reimaginings, requels, sequels, whatever you want to call them. There hasn't been any effort. And some people say, well, Rob, Discovery jumped 1,000 years into the future. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but if you look up a document called Star Trek Federation, not the Reeve Stevens book, but you can look up Star Trek series proposals that never went anywhere. I want to point out, if you look up Star Trek Federation, and you might be surprised at some of the names that are on it. Star Trek Federation, Mike Okuda did the logo for it. Now, it never went anywhere, and it was never officially pitched. But I'm just saying, there was a series proposal out there about jumping 1,000 years into the future of the Federation. And the Federation was in a state of decline or disarray. And this was something that was created. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that was out there. That was in the zeitgeist. Now, there's lots of, creation that happens. That people have good ideas, But, I'll leave you all to go Google Star Trek Federation series proposal and, see what comes up. See what you find. And, but anyway, hey, Discovery, now that authenticity, you think you're going to jump 1,000 years in the future, but what do? You bring us back the Guardian of Forever, but because you think you're so clever, you go back to Harlan Ellison's original script that was rejected and turn Paul Guilfoyle into Star Trek's version of Doctor Who. Okay, and then you've got Section 31 in the Mirror Universe, and then you've got now The Chase, the Star Trek episode from the 6th season of TNG. When are you ever going to tell an authentic story? An authentic story that does not rely on all the work that came before. When Next Generation went forward, they knew they had to chart their own path. You know what? I dare say they had to boldly go and reinvent Star Trek. And it was a rocky road. Obviously, we all know that Star Trek The Next Generation didn't become Star Trek The Next Generation until Michael Piller came in the 3rd season, and he did something really interesting. He inverted the storytelling. We're no longer going to worry about what's out there. All of our stories, and this was a fundamental shift, and it made Next Generation work. When Michael Piller came in, he said, look, all of our stories have to be first about our character. One of our characters will have outside things happen, but it has to be about our characters first. And we're not going to focus on what's out there, some craziness. We have to have a story about our characters first, which made Next Generation the show that it eventually became. That was authentic. That was somebody who knew, this maybe isn't working, so let's try and make it work. And if you look at Star Trek The Next Generation, yeah, you had episodes like Relics that brought back Scotty. And then, of course, for the 25th anniversary of Star Trek, and to tie in to Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, they did do, during the 5th season, Unification Part 1 and Part 2, where they brought back Leonard Nimoy and Mark Leonard. So they did do those things, but those were stunt things, those were event things, and they were nice. It was nice that they did those things. So, and they were really interesting. They gave us interesting things like Jolan True. Hey, I never knew that's a Romulan phrase that's gone into the vernacular. Like, kapla. That was all that stuff. It's very cool stuff. Anyway, authentic. I don't know what Alex Kurtzman's talking about. I don't know what that means. I am sitting in a room that is full of authentic Star Trek stories. Hundreds of Star Trek novels, which, slowly but surely they're all getting chipped away at without accreditation. But what are you going to do? Let's see what you guys are saying. I don't know what you're saying because I'm going to go. I haven't looked yet. But there's a lot of commentary here. Let's see what you guys are saying. I feel like I've been rambling. Okay, ramblers, let's get rambling. Let's see what you guys have to say. Let's start out. Captain Robert April has been. You know what, Captain Robert April? That he's been a member for 21 months. That reminds me of something. Captain Robert April. Our website is currently down for the count. We got to bring it back. But Captain Robert April wrote. He saw what I was going to. So here's what he said. He said, Alex Kurtzman wouldn't know an authentic Star Trek story if it bit him in the nuts and started singing Mammy. Strange New Worlds is not Star Trek. It's a semi-well-intentioned imitation, but it's being run by people who don't know what they're doing. The closest we've gotten to authentic Star Trek is Season 3 of Picard. Terry Matalas started out working on real Star Trek, and that's why it worked. And the animated side with Lower Decks and Prodigy because they have showrunners who understand Star Trek. Alex Kurtzman is utterly clueless, and Akiva Goldsman is a fucking hack. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, Captain Robert April. He goes on to say, B. Joe Trimble told me the reason why there won't be any update for the Star Trek Concordance anytime soon is because the schmucks in charge don't want to share credit or royalties. Sums things up pretty well. Well, Robert April, astute as always. It's really funny? If you want to know how authentic things can get, take a look at, if you look at Exo-6, the company that's making the high-end Star Trek action figures, look at the two figures that have sold the least. Again, I'll wait. Ace Hanlon has been a member for 5 months. He's a PGS hero and says, I recently watched all the TOS movies and quite enjoyed them. What is your ranking of them, and why do you rank them in whichever rank? Well, first of all, now, I'm going to say right away, my favorite Star Trek movie is Star Trek The Motion Picture. And if you want to sit and listen to me rant and rave, I will tell you why it's the most Star Trek of all the Star Trek movies. Deeply flawed, yes. I mean, if you want to read, I don't need to relitigate this, but the 4K director's cut goes a long way toward fixing the problems. It's my favorite Star Trek movie, and of all the Star Trek movies. I think Star Trek 2 as a movie is the best Star Trek movie, obviously. Star Trek 4 is a lot of fun, and I like Star Trek 6. Star Trek 3, I'm not a big fan of. I know there's a lot of great stuff in it. One of my favorite scenes in Star Trek is Sarek showing up and mind melding with Kirk. There's a lot of great stuff in Star Trek 3, but I think it's hampered by Leonard Nimoy. He's a first-time director, and I think the direction and some of it looks quite cheap, even though ILM's effects work is beautiful. So there you go. I mean, so my rankings would be number 1 would be Star Trek the Motion Picture. But I will freely admit that's my favorite for a number of reasons, and I think it's the most Star Trek. But as a movie, I prefer the hard science fiction angle it takes. But as a movie, I understand. But for me, Star Trek the Motion Picture is my favorite. But in terms of, I'll give you a ranking of what I think the best Star Trek movies are. I'm going to go Star Trek 2, Star Trek the Motion Picture, Star Trek 6, Star Trek 4, Star Trek 3, and Star Trek 5. And that would be... And my rankings are... Look, the problem with the Star Trek feature films is Star Trek the Motion Picture. So, Star Trek the Motion Picture famously was one of the most expensive movies ever made. But the reason it was so expensive, there's 2 reasons. One, they had to roll in all of the... there was the Star Trek Planet of the Titans movie that did not happen, that Philip Kaufman was going to direct. There was the Star Trek Phase 2 TV series that they were going to make, and they were deep into making it. 13 scripts had been written, and then it got shelved because of Star Wars' success, they were going to make a movie. So there was millions of dollars spent in development that was rolled into the budget of Star Trek the Motion Picture because they had to pay for it all. So then they locked themselves into a release date. They had production issues because they fired Robert Abel and Associates. They had a very short period of time to finish the effects. They barely carried that movie over the finish line. It was not, and it really was an unfinished movie until back in 2001. Robert Wise was able to be involved with Dave Fine and Darren and Mike Mendocino and the team that did the original director's edition of it's not really a director's cut, it's a director's edition of that movie. So still my favorite. Bert has been a member for 25 months and says, "Hi, Rob. I've been watching you since summer of 2019 when you were in the original Robservatory. Could you give me a 5-7 birthday shout out?" Bert. I mean, happy birthday, Bert. Let's see. Can I say happy birthday, Bert? You've been a member for 25 months. You've been watching me since 2019. Can I really wish you a happy birthday, the happiest of birthdays? It's the oldest you've ever been. What a great birthday I hope you would have. I think it's amazing, Bert, that you have a birthday. My birthday, of course, is every day, but it's May 15th. But listen, I can't wish you a happy birthday. I can't, Bert. I can't say, Bert, happy birthday to you. Thank you so much for being a member of this channel, and thank you so much for watching me for so long. I can't wish you a happy birthday because if I did that, then I'd have to wish everybody a happy birthday. So, Bert, happy birthday to you, and many happy returns. I hope your next twirl around the sun's your best yet. I wish I could say that to you, but I can't because then I'd have to say happy birthday to everybody. Happy birthday to you, Bert. Darth Plato says, happy birthday, Rob. Rant. Not a very good rant, I have to say. I was kind of scattered. But Scott Bartholomew says, I could listen to you for hours deconstructing the mess the Trek has devolved into. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Romy Forever says, just shown love. I appreciate that. Hunter Becknell says, Rob, nitpicking nerd, put together the scene between Brent and David in the brig. No. I did that. He even says that he took my things, but he added the, that's my cut, but he took the original footage from the episode and put it together, but he got that from my cut and he added stuff to it. So, and it's great. Nitpicking Nerd did stuff that they wouldn't allow me to do. that I did do, but they told me no because they didn't. They couldn't make it look. I couldn't make it look like it was finished, which is what it was originally. Scott Bartholomew, but he used my footage. Scott Bartholomew says that Balance of Terror T-shirt is badass, given to me by a fan. Scott Bartholomew says Kurtzman is oblivious to Trek canon. Yeah, you know what? I didn't know Khan Noonien Singh was a teenager in 2020's Canada. What? Darth Plato says Kurtzman has the ring. Which ring? The ring of power? The ring of destruction? JDSCT says, hey, Rob, not sure if you have already talked about this, but did you read about them finding the original Enterprise model used in the opening of the original series? Pretty cool. Yes. As a matter of fact, this is a very interesting story. So there was a 3-foot model of the Enterprise that was used. It was you see a shot of it rushing by the camera in the every episode of the original series, and it was on Gene Roddenberry's desk for the longest time, and he loaned it out. I want to say he loaned it out sometime in the late 70s, maybe when they were working on motion picture, and it disappeared. It disappeared. Gone. Poof. No one knew where it went. And it was discovered. Somebody had it and passed away. And it was going to go up for auction. It was going to go up for sale. Now Rod Roddenberry was able to get it. They're going to restore it. It wasn't in the greatest shape, but they're going to restore it. And yeah. Very exciting. And it's probably going to be put on display somewhere, which is great. Ria Lavi says, why did Paramount decide to keep Kurtzman? What argument an exec would make? Well, I think here's the thing. Hey, if you're delivering things on time and on budget or whatever, see, the thing is that people now, they don't know whether something is good or bad. If somebody's delivering it on time, well, okay. Like if you were to ask somebody at Paramount, they probably think Alex Kurtzman's doing a good job. That's why they keep making Star Trek shows. But where's the merchandising? I mean, seriously, if you think about Zeitgeist IP, all right, Zeitgeist IP, whether it's Star Wars stuff, Hot Toys, Star Wars Hot Toys, they're making how many Ahsoka toys? Star Trek is essentially a niche. It was always a niche brand, but Star Trek, there's so much Star Trek that's being made. The Star Trek that gets made now, if it was being made by people that were truly authentic storytellers, they would know you would get a House of the Dragon. What we need to see is Star Trek showrunners, and I think Terry Matalas. I mean, I'm not going to say that Star Trek Picard season 3 was perfect, but they were on a time crunch. I mean, they couldn't. They had to go. I mean, I think one of the things I was always missing from Star Trek Picard season 3, if somebody said to me, Rob, if you went back and if you could change one thing about I wouldn't change anything. I would add something. And they just didn't have time, but I would add, how did the Changeling and the Borg Queen hook up? I would love to have seen an episode where we saw them meeting, because two bad bitches that were wronged by the Federation coming back to wreck shop. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, that's what we saw. I love that idea. It was so, but I wish that we would have seen them. I would love to have seen Vadic and the Borg Queen, and I know they probably couldn't have done that, but I love that idea. And people, they really gave her and the Federation wronging these two alien races in the pursuit of making the galaxy. I mean, and people would say, oh, well, that's more deconstructing the Federation. But I would say this, one of the interesting things about people always say, oh, Deep Space Nine is not Roddenberry Trek. The thing about Deep Space Nine, though, that I find interesting is, how does a post-scarcity utopian civilization survive when there's a tremendous onslaught by an alien civilization against the very values that it espouses? Like, what do you do when the Dominion War happens and the Dominion comes after you? How does a utopian civilization cope? If they didn't, they would have been destroyed. So, and I think Deep Space Nine does a wonderful job of showing these people that are of good character, that are representative of that positive future, dealing with a war they didn't want, that was imposed on them. And even though when you're dealing with very, very moral gray grounds, or the morality that's very gray, in the pale moonlight, that episode, what they have to do, I can live with it, is a great episode of Star Trek, because you're dealing with how do moral people who are confronted with a very amoral situation, how do they, Deep Space Nine, especially the latter seasons, is all about the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And in the pale moonlight is how one man grapples with the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And you know what really is chilling? At the end of that episode, when Sisko erases his log and he says, I can live with it. I can live with it. He won't. He can't. He'll be haunted by that decision for the rest of his life. And that was why that episode is so great, because it resonates. It's authentic. You know what? What is authentic as far as storytelling goes? Would you be surprised to know that I have a little article to read about that? I found this article on T.A. Barron, and this was published on October 28th, 2023. And I guess it's a podcast. And here is the title of it: Unveiling the Transformative Magic of Authenticity in Storytelling. As I dive into the enchanting realm of storytelling, I often find myself in awe of its profound metamorphic potential. Stories, whether they unfurl under a starlit sky by a crackling campfire, are bound within the weathered pages of a book or even whispered through the ether of a podcast, possess a unique ability to traverse the boundaries of time, culture, and individual experience. They have the magic to transport us to far-off worlds, challenge our perspectives, and touch our hearts in a way that leaves an indelible mark on our souls. Authentic and vulnerable storytelling carries me from my musings to the actual heart of writing and the transformative power within. As we journey into the soul of storytelling, let me remind you of the captivating nature of stories. Each one is a universe of its own, teeming with characters who become friends, adversaries who teach us lessons, and settings that become homes away from home. A well-told story can pull at our heartstrings, make us laugh, cry, and inspire us to chase our dreams with fervor. It's no wonder that we often find ourselves spellbound by the art of storytelling. But what is it that makes some stories truly exceptional? What allows them to rise above the narratives and seep into our very being, making us ponder, reflect, and ultimately grow? The answer lies in the concept of transcendence in literature. It's a term that goes beyond the plot, the characters, and the setting. Transcendence in literature refers to stories that resonate on a deeper level, leaving a lasting impact that transcends the boundaries of the page. Now, I want to take you deeper into the heart of this concept. It's the authenticity and the vulnerability woven into the narrative that elevates stories to the realm of transcendence. We all know that authenticity is the heartbeat of any great story. Authentic characters with relatable flaws and emotions allow us to connect on a human level. They become our companions on this incredible path, and their struggles resonate with our own. During our conversation on my podcast, Magic in Mountains, Isabel Allende shares stories from her deeply moving book, Paula. It was in the midst of a personal tragedy in the darkest moments of her life that she embarked on this journey of vulnerability and authenticity. The power of storytelling lies in Isabel's courage to share her most vulnerable moments, her deepest fears, and her unwavering love. The authenticity of her experience made Paula a book capable of touching the hearts of readers around the world. Isabel's vulnerability transcended the page. As she penned the memoir of her sorrow, she organized the chaos of her life, providing a structure to contain her pain. In the process, she connected with countless readers who found solace in her words. Authenticity became the bridge between her world and theirs. What truly amazes me is the deep connection that vulnerability and authenticity foster between author and reader. As an author, I've had the privilege of hearing from readers whose lives have been touched by my stories. I'm humbled to know that through the vulnerability and authenticity I've shared in my books, I've kindled hope, inspired dreams, and stirred emotions. Stories that expose the raw, unfiltered emotions of their creators have the power to resonate with readers in a way that is impossible to replicate. In our own struggles and triumphs, we recognize a reflection of ourselves, and it's in those moments that we find solace, encouragement, and a sense of belonging. In the Magic and Mountains episode with Isabel Allende, she also shares her unconventional dream about Antonio Banderas, a tale both hilarious and daring. It was an anecdote that made us laugh and reminded us that storytelling is not bound by conventional norms. It's about exploring the depths of our imagination and bravely sharing it with the world. It reminds us that we are not alone in our experience. Stories emerge from the darkness. Characters walk out of a mist. No map, no directions, just a candle and an invitation to muse. This is how Isabel writes, with transcendence, vulnerability, and magic. So I thought that was not very insightful, but interesting in the sense that it has to be true, authentic to the human experience. You can't make a story you can't force a topic into it and have it be authentic. A great story has to be authentic to the characters in the story that you're telling. But really, Lavi, I don't know why Kurtzman, they gave him Star Trek and he's kind of succeeding. I don't know if and when you're kind of succeeding, you fail upwards. I would say that those Star Trek should be the Tiffany of science fiction on TV. It should be the smartest. It should be the best. It is not. It is not. It's really dumb. Star Trek now is monumentally stupid. It really is. I mean, the last episode flew in the face. The foot race episode flew in the face of the Prime Directive. It was as if one of the writers, I couldn't find where he said this, but one of the writers, he's like the new expert on Star Trek. No one who writes Discovery even really knows Star Trek, and he sat down for a weekend and binged Star Trek episodes. He's like, oh, I'm up to date. But I mean, who watches The Watchers? I think Major Grin talked about this. Not good stuff. Scott Bartholomew says Tarantino could make a great Trek film. He could. But I don't know. I don't know if Tarantino would make the best, if he would be best for the franchise, because I wouldn't want Tarantino should make Tarantino movies. I don't think a Tarantino Star Trek would necessarily. He wants to go back to Sigma Ocean and do a piece of the action. Could be fun. Hunter Becknell says, can we talk about the new Superman suit? I liked it. There's death, taxes, and people will always complain about the new Joker, whoever's playing him, and the new Superman suit. I would say wait and see. I like the fact it's got a little new 52. That was a candid set photo taken by the set photographer. It was not from necessarily a scene. I think that was just a moment where he was adjusting his suit before they shot. I like that shot a lot. I thought it was great. But I'm always going to wait and see until the finished film how it looks. But I liked it. And I really like the Kingdom Come S. I think it works. I know a lot of people don't. Scott Bartholomew says, bottom line, Trek needs good writers. Trek does need good writers. Star Trek is an action-adventure, science fiction, allegorical show. We need writers that can write science fiction, allegory, and action-adventure. Where are those writers? Because they're not writing Star Trek. Yeah. RTNZ says, when Kirk's dropkick fails, he calls Chuck Norris. Yes, he does. Lucasfilm offers you the chance to write and direct a Cy Snoodles movie about the Return of the Jedi creature starring Doja Cat as Cy Snoodles. Do you accept? What's the plot? He's always throwing this shit at me. I have to come up with the spot. Here's what I would do. I would do Mahogany. Do you know where you're going to? I would do that. I'd do Mahogany with Cy Snoodles. And yet Cy Snoodles would fall into the depths of a heroin addiction, trying to make and Return of the Jedi is just it's after she's hit rock bottom and she's bringing herself. I'd even make it that Jabba the Hutt was a big fan of Cy Snoodles before she fell off the wagon and became a complete heroin addict, and it was Jabba the Hutt who got her into rehab and gave her a chance to dance for his court and sing for his court. So that would be part of it. But she was able to get away before the sail barge was blown up. Or something like that. Hello, Rob, my hot man lover. Am I a hot man lover? I keep hearing all this hype about Netflix and Baby Reindeer. Am I missing out on the show? No idea what it's about. Well, it's about a stalker who stalks this comedian. and it's supposed to be pretty. It sounds like the Misery, the TV series, except it's based on a true story. So I don't. Other than that, I don't know much about it because I haven't seen it yet. It sounds good to me. So yeah, I'm in. Count me in. I want to watch it. So I think we are all caught up. I'm all caught up. So if you want to fire in a super chat or tip or whatever, you can do that. By the way, this Kurtzman, the link is in the description for this article. I still don't know what being an authentic Star Trek story is, other than, I mean, being authentic to Star Trek, which I haven't seen from Discovery. I mean, here's the thing, too. There's this weird idea, this whole idea of this visual reboot, which I don't understand. I mean, you have to redesign everything, and yet you're making a prequel, and you expect people to buy into the fact that it's supposed to be. I mean, you change everything. You know, it would be one thing if you went back into Star Trek history and were doing things that felt like. It would be really interesting. There's a lot of stuff in Star Trek history that would be interesting to delve into, like in Strange New Worlds, to look and see what happened on Tarsus 4, you know, with Kodos the Executioner. So, when James Kirk was a young man, he was on a colony, and that colony was struck by famine, and Kodos was the governor of the colony, and Governor Kodos decided, because if everyone was allowed to starve, then everybody, you know, they're all going to starve, everybody would die. So Kodos came up with the novel plan that if he killed half the population, if he executed half the population of the colony, the other half would have enough food to survive until rescue. It might have been interesting if the Enterprise under Pike was the ship that arrived there. But to me, that would be something to delve into. That's backstory. I mean, you could say it's a prequel tale. But when you're going in and you're saying, okay, Michael Burnham was and I understand people can say, okay, Sybok was the half-brother we never knew Spock had. That's a very valid concern. I thought that was lame myself. But I thought Lawrence Luckenbill was great as Sybok. But did it have to be Spock's brother? Couldn't it have just been a renegade Vulcan? Bringing in a long-lost relative that we don't know is one of the laziest things you can do in TV. So Michael Burnham comes in, and as Spock's sister, you're now expecting a fan base of a show that's been around for over half a century to suddenly accept the idea that this character that we've never heard of before made Spock the man he is today. And then, of course, you know, rather than write Spock as the interesting character that he was written as in the original series, you go back and you saddle him with all the normal foibles that human beings have and apply them to making him some lovelorn character is so weird. It's so ridiculous, and it shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what Spock actually is. Vulcans have emotions. They cast out their animal passions on these sands, as the Vulcan master said in Star Trek the Motion Picture. If Romulans are indeed, as I suspect, and they are, offshoots of the Vulcans, you know, that's what... They have emotions. They've just learned to govern their passions. That's what the teachings of Surak, that's how Surak brought the Vulcan civilization back from the brink. And yet it's not understood. And this idea that somehow Spock, by the time Spock graduated from the Academy, Spock is the uber Vulcan. He's not torn down the middle. He knows exactly who he is. As a matter of fact, he's probably more Vulcan than Vulcan because he chose the path. He could have taken the human path, but no, he chose to adopt the Vulcan path, the path of logic. And he chose to do that. And he's doing it the best he can. He's the first Vulcan, or maybe not the first, but he's a Vulcan in Starfleet Academy. He chose this path. And they keep trying to reduce him to modern character tropes from any TV show, which they're not writing Spock. They're basically writing some adolescent character, and then it turns around where he's having this ongoing sexual relationship with T'Pring. It's so weird that they're writing Spock as basically a human character that just, he's more like he's autistic than anything else. It's bizarre. And there's a fundamental lack of understanding of Star Trek throughout the whole show. Gregory Gilgan has been a member for 3 months. Thanks, Gregory. Kenneth, I'm still reeling from hello Rob, my hot man lover. As far as I know, we haven't been lovers. But if I inhabit your dreams, I'm happy to do so. But I like that hot man lover. At this point in my life, I'll take it. Scott Bartholomew says, do you have any ideas for future Trek? Look, in our idea for a future Trek, the thing that fascinated me is how does a civilization not fall apart? And one of the things that we wanted to do was, rather than doing something ridiculously stupid like the burn, what if the future had a fuel crisis? I mean, here's the thing. As if every civilization only used dilithium for faster than light travel. I mean, any cursory glance to any Star Trek book could have said, well, the Romulans used artificial singularities to power their warp drive. And I'm sure there's other people that went faster than light with other ways too. Ion power. We saw that throughout Star Trek history. But no, the burn, dilithium, It was so ill-conceived. It was just so stupid. I mean, I hated that. But the idea of a federation that grows complacent, fat, and happy, and as time passes, if you don't maintain the civilization that you have, it can fall to ruin. And that's, I kind of wanted to, as an allegory for America, how do we prevent the destruction or the fading away of American democracy? And that would be the idea that I had for a Star Trek series, hence Star Trek Federation, the idea that the Federation, maybe it had reached, rather than the Visigoths coming over and destroying, sacking Rome or whatever the hell was going to happen, we have a Federation that literally things have changed. The Vulcans and the Romulans have reunified, so they're off on their trip. The Klingons have had a cultural revolution. They had a renaissance, and we said they've become more like Tang Dynasty characters. And you have like the Bajorans and the wormhole aliens. Maybe they reached some kind of accord. The galaxy changed, and the Federation has found that and the quest for exploration, maybe the entire Milky Way galaxy has been explored, and there's not a lot of nooks and crannies left to find. How do you find meaning in that future? And so I wanted to do a Star Trek show that delved into the next stage of human evolution. What would that look like? And one of the things that I think that Star Trek has missed out on, especially the future that Star Trek Discovery has shown us, is woefully unimaginative. I mean, human beings, if we extrapolate on our current technology, where we're going to be in 1,000 years, I mean, it's Khan said it best. Oh, there has been technological advancement, to be sure, but how little man has changed. It would be interesting to see, well, what happens when medical technology does extend life? What if human beings could live thousands of years without taking the spice melange? What if we could? What would that look like? How would that change us as people? So I think what would really be interesting is we would be a transhuman, post-utopian, post-scarcity civilization. Where does a society find meaning in that? And how would we change? And what would go on? And I think it would be fascinating to tell that kind of a story. And that was what I was interested in doing when we came up with the idea of Star Trek Federation. So not to be cheeky, but after
Enterprise went off the air, and before Bad Robot, or when Enterprise just gone off the air and Bad Robot had yet to take over the Star Trek franchise to make the J.J. Abrams movies, I was working on Superman Returns as a documentarian with Bryan Singer. And it was the fourth of the documentaries. We had done X1 and X2. I'd done Usual Suspects, X1 and X2, and made documentaries for those physical media releases. And I was working on Superman Returns. And I was with Bryan in Seattle having dinner, having sushi with Chris McQuarrie. So it was me, Chris McQuarrie, and Bryan. And I had brought up the idea of why don't we pitch, because Bryan appeared in Nemesis, and the three of us were huge Star Trek fans. And I said, it would be really interesting if we teamed up and pitched Paramount to do Star Trek. And I came up with this idea. I said, this idea I told you, it was called Star Trek Federation. And it took place 1,000 years in the future. And the universe had changed. So everything old was new again. Like when we meet the Vulcans, they were very different Vulcans. They had reunified with the Romulans. And they were kind of both, and it had been hundreds of years since reunification had happened, and they had evolved. They were much more zen, and all the different races in the galaxy, things had changed. Things had because remember, Deep Space Nine, that was the first time the wormhole was revealed. Well, hundreds of years in, what would the relationship of the Bajorans be? Because the Bajoran religion was in fact tied to the wormhole aliens, so their belief in the prophets was realized. It was true. They weren't saying the prophets were their creators, but they did worship them as the prophets. And that was true. So what would happen with the Bajorans, and how far would their civilization progress? How would it change if they developed a relationship with these non-corporeal beings? What would that do to a civilization? So we could delve into that. And then, the Cardassians, this martial civilization, I always saw the Cardassians as it was the Weimar Republic, and they became kind of space Nazis. They fell into fascism, and when they went from their Weimar Republic period right into National Socialism, and they became the Nazis. But after the Dominion War and after what happened, they were able to come out of that, and they were able to embrace their artistic side, and so they would have evolved as well. But when all the civilizations are sort of and there would have been a prosperity in the galaxy, but what's missing is the quest for knowledge. What happens when you become complacent? What happens when everything's okay? When the conflict goes away, and what do you do? How do you find meaning? And I think nowadays, as we are on the cusp of right now, we have generative AI, but if we do reach the singularity that Ray Kurzweil writes about, and AI, true artificial intelligence that is self-aware, we get the what happens in her, where these operating systems that are sentient. What is that going to do to us as people? And that to me is what a Star Trek show should be about. And it has to be about humanity and going into the future. And I would say that the defining, I always talk about Yuval Harari's books, Sapiens and Homo Deus. And Sapiens is a rollicking human history of the last 100,000 years. And if you read that book, it's wildly entertaining. And so is the follow-up, Homo Deus. But at the end of Sapiens, I've said this before on the show, he poses the question, who do we as human beings, who do we want to be? What kind of a race of people? There is one race of humans on this planet, the human race. And who is it we want to be? If we're going to put aside our petty differences on Earth and become a spacefaring race, we're not going to be people from China or Russia or the United States or Argentina or anywhere in the Congo, Madagascar, wherever. We're going to be people from Earth. And that's, once we're a spacefaring race, that's all, people are not going to see us, our petty differences, they're going to see us as Earthlings. So what happens then when, as we face the onslaught of something like AI, how are we going to find meaning in our own lives in the face of technological advancement and in the face of not having to struggle? How are we going to find meaning? And I think that that's going to become very relevant. And that's what my Star Trek show would be the overarching premise. How do you turn that into an action adventure science fiction show? Well, that would be the hard part. That's why I would hire good writers. Jaleel Tyson says, what are your thoughts on Chubby Tilly getting a Starfleet Academy reboot? Will it be authentic? Here's the thing. Tilly, of course, she did have a child. The actress had a child. And I almost kind of feel bad for her that we would say that about her. And like they had her in a foot race in the last episode, not this week's, but last week's. She's going to look, here's the thing. If you're going to make a Starfleet Academy show, make a Starfleet Academy show, and if you want to, if you ask me, you got to look at a show called The Paper Chase. You got to look at John Houseman's character. What we need are a bunch of awesome, a Starfleet. They're going to make a Starfleet Academy show about the interpersonal relationships with all these cadets. What they really should make a Starfleet Academy show about is the professors. That's what I would do. And have a great bunch of these incredible characters. And, you base these professors off real people, going all the way back to like Aristotle. If I was going to do a Starfleet Academy show, it would all be about the professors and not like their interpersonal relationships, but about each professor would be delivering the Star Trekian human perspective, where it would be you'd go through a literal adventure through the human thought, and you'd have all these alien professors. You have a Vulcan professor, and the professors would be the stars. They're going to do a drama. It's going to be Melrose Place in college or whatever the hell it's going to be. But I would invert it. And Tilly, Tilly's like the most un-Star Trek character ever. And I have no interest in watching her teaching school. Because, if it's what you feel, no. Give me some hard-edged professors like John Houseman's character. Was it Professor Kingsford or something? Kingsley. Was it Kingsley? I don't remember. But that would be... or Dead Poets Society or Goodwill Hunting or whatever. Or I would do Donna Tartt's The Secret History at Starfleet Academy. Probably wouldn't go for that, but that's what I would do. Scott Bartholomew asked about the 1,000th show. Specifics. I don't have any specifics yet. I'm still putting it all together. I'm working on it. Hunter Becknell says, I don't buy the visual reboot because they showed Pike's Enterprise from the cage in season 2 of Discovery. Then they brought the ISS Enterprise that looks like the Strange New Worlds Enterprise. What the fuck? It does. You know what? They don't know. That's the thing. They don't know. They're not thinking. It's so lame. That's why God bless Terry Metalis for putting a real Connie, a real Constitution class in the Fleet Museum. When I first saw that, I was like, I wonder how they got away with that. You go, Terry. Scott Bartholomew says New Trek has turned into Tom Swift. They wish. But yes, it kind of has. Greggy Gilgan says, if Star Trek continues the way it is, the IP will become as confusing as current Star Wars. The average watcher is clueless about where it sits in the timeline or canon, and if it's not already that way now. I totally agree. I mean, where does it sit? None of it makes any sense. Spock doesn't act like he's supposed to act. Khan, Noonien Singh, there's no eugenics wars. Here's a ridiculous thing that Alex Kurtzman, he didn't say, as Kiva Goldsman did. This idea that they want our history to somehow link up with Star Trek history, that's why they're pushing the eugenics wars forward. Star Trek, we share a history, but it's not the same. I don't understand why people. Star Trek is an alternate universe. It's an alternate alt story. Why people think that it has to follow us? Look, I've said this a million times. Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 got it right. Blade Runner was an analog future. Yeah, it had flying cars, but it didn't have cell phones. Whatever happened in the Blade Runner world, we got replicants, but we didn't get the kind of technology. We have different technology. And when they made Blade Runner 2049, did they do a visual reboot? Did they give everybody cell phones? No. They kept that analog future. We had cool things like, here's a wooden ball with information on it that rolls down. This idea that Star Trek's past has to be our past is fucking dumb. In Star Trek history, there was the eugenics wars that were in the 1990s. You had people, the eugenics, the products of those programs probably began after World War II, monstrous as that might be. That's when, eugenics was a big thing in the late 1800s and the 1900s. They talked a lot about that. And that's where the whole idea of genetic Superman came from. Superior ability breeds superior ambition. All that was cool. It all had historical background. That's where it all came from. And they just ruined all of that. What they did in Strange New Worlds to the timeline is criminal. And it's stupid. Between what they did to the Gorn and what they did to the timelines, fuck that show. Because you know what? The history, you already have it. Why do you have to change it all? And if you're going to change it, why do you have to change it badly? So, I don't know. Scott says, Star Trek should evolve like For All Mankind. I agree. I think For All Mankind's interesting because it's both a soap opera and a great alternate universe science fiction show. And it was designed that way, and it's really well done. And I really like it. Yeah. I think so. Ronzilla sends in a $20 super chat and says, "Hi, Rob. Disney Plus has added all the Planet of the Apes movies for streaming. Disney has also added Tim Burton's version. No ape button. I can't wait to watch them all this weekend. Cheers." Yeah, I bet they did it because of me. It's a little late, though. Wouldn't you, as the lead up to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, shouldn't they put all the Planet of the Apes movies back like 3 or 4 months and then promote? But at least they did it. I'm wondering, though, are those 4K transfers of the Planet of the Apes movies? Do we have those transfers? Thomas Logan says Antonio Banderas equals Yeez. Grimes is an AT-AT driver, ATST driver. That's Grimes is an ATST driver. You're a wild man, Thomas. You're a wild, wild man. And one day you're going to get that box of discs that's right there. But you're a wild man. A wild man. Let's see where we are. I think I've got everybody. I think I've got y'all. I think I'm going to end this show. Fire flew from his fingertips as he rosined up his bow. Do you think I should end this show? I have nothing more to say. I've always got more to say, but what can I say? Like, subscribe. We've been doing some fun shows, a lot of great feedback, and I want to thank you for that. I think the audience has been great lately, and I hope you guys are enjoying these shows. I really thought the show on eroticism was fun, and I've gotten some great. I put a little Instagram thank you video out because I have received some very interesting, thoughtful commentary, and we will get the letters back up. It's frustrating to not be able to get your letters. So, anyway, on that note, I want to thank everybody that generously supports this channel via super chats and tips and all of that and memberships. And I want to thank my moderating staff. I don't know if Tom Jr. Jackson is here. Is he? I don't know. If he is, well, thank him because he's great. And everybody, Lord Toth, anybody, thank you all for being great. And remember, you can always watch Star Trek. The original series stands alone. You don't have to take my word for it. Just go watch it. And it's amazing how the best of the Star Trek episodes are so adult. And if I might, there's a girl that I do not know, but I find it fascinating. She's never watched the original series, called Bunny Tail Reacts, and she's been going through the original series. She's actually got some very thoughtful responses. And then there's another woman a channel called Popcorn in Bed, and she watched Best of Both. She's been going through Star Trek, and she's having a lot of fun. And she just watched Best of Both Worlds and did a reaction video that was great. And it's interesting to watch, not just because they're girls, not just because they're attractive women. That's part of it. But it's really interesting to watch people go back, male or female, to watch Star Trek when it is 58 years old and to see people still getting something out of it, which is great. And the only reason I bring up those two women is because they're currently going through the original series and they just popped up on my radar. And both of them, I think, put on pretty entertaining talkbacks and responses. And it's been interesting to watch them do it. So I recommend all of those channels. Check it out. And I'll be back on the John Campea Show tomorrow. And I'll probably be back here tomorrow doing something, relatively exciting. What do you guys think about modern Star Trek? Just tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. Am I wrong? I don't know. Only you can say for sure. And on that note, I will say this. Kenneth Colton says, with Paramount on the verge of being acquired, what effect could this have on Trek? Well, all bets are off. New owners are new owners. Do they have to honor the current contracts? I don't know. Look, I think that Star Trek has been mishandled. I think it's been mishandled because it hasn't been it's the approach that's wrong, I think. And remember, Star Trek Discovery started out as someone else's show and it was turned into what it is. So whether that's good or bad. So I would say, well, I think it's bad. But anyway, on that note, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, as I always say, have a better day and keep on trekking.